I think we're at the hour. I'm just going to give people a minute or two to hop on. For anyone who has joined already, thank you so much for joining us today. This is your Vice President of Customer Success at Chili Piper talking. I'm Gemma, quite new here. Very fortunate to be here. If you are a Chili Piper customer, you'll know that the team here is pretty awesome. And what's also great about working here is that I have brilliant customers, and two of them with me today. So starting with Chad, VP of CS from SaaSOptics, and Pat, Chief Customer Officer at GoCardless.
Nice.
So I'll let them do introductions in a moment. I'll just give people a minute to join and get connected. Today we're going to be talking about how to drive operational efficiencies for your customer success team. It's a topic that's very dear to my heart because I think as leaders, it is our duty to make our staff's life easier. And a lot of the time in CS, we talk about making our customers' lives easier. But a sure way to do that is to make everybody who's supporting the customer happy and find ways to ease any kind of administrative burdens on their end. So it's really a privilege to talk about this topic, because my hope is that it will give inspiration to other CS leaders out there on how they can make their team's life easier. And part of that will be through using our Chili Piper software, which, if you don't already know, is a routing and scheduling software. But there's also a strategic component behind it, which we're really going to dig into today with Pat and Chad. Just a bit of housekeeping. There is the opportunity to ask questions in the Q&A box here. So we will be keeping an eye on those, and we'll leave some time at the end to answer questions that do come through. The recording will also be made available on our resources page on our website, and you will all receive a copy of it by email. So with that said, I'm going to hand over to my wonderful guests, starting with Pat. Could you please talk a little bit about GoCardless, your role there, and your team?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, thanks for having me on. Always enjoyable to speak about these topics, very close to my own heart. So I'm the Chief Customer Officer at GoCardless. We're a financial technology company. We're based in the UK, but we've got offices in 5 different countries, including the US over in San Francisco. We serve in excess of 60,000 customers globally. And put simply, our network makes it easy to collect recurring and one-off payments directly from our customers' bank accounts, if that makes sense. So as opposed to credit cards, we operate on the account-to-account network, predominantly via direct debit, which, you know, in Europe is a very well-known, very kind of common method of payment. In the US, less so, but becoming more and more prevalent. So yeah, my team is effectively everything post-sale at GoCardless. So it encompasses account management, customer success management, onboarding, professional services, support, and customer experience. So it's a pretty multi-talented, multifunctional crew. I've been in the business 2 years. We brought the customer success group together 2 years ago with, you know, the express directive to make the customer experience as high quality and as I would classify it as kind of SaaS quality as possible. Because, you know, our company was born from self-serve, very much kind of reactive support. I'd almost classify it to some degree as similar to a B2C model rather than a B2B model in some aspects. But over the past 2 years, we've really gone very hard into the mid-market and enterprise. So we've evolved pretty rapidly over that period. And yeah, still loving it.
Absolutely. And congratulations on your recent valuation. I believe you are now.
Yeah, we had a solid funding round back in November. You know, it's the bulk of it was based on, you know, our are positioned to be able to take advantage of open banking, which is something that's pretty a high priority in Europe, particularly at the moment, and I know in North America as well, with companies like Plaid and many others really kind of going hard into that space to effectively just provide a whole other layer of customer experience through third-party apps and the ability to connect directly through customers' bank accounts through a variety of banks. It's really exciting, actually. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting couple of years in the space generally, and hopefully we'll be able to take advantage of that.
Awesome. Thank you, Pat, for that introduction. And Chad, it would be great if you could do the same, talk about your role, who SaaSOptics are, if anyone hasn't already come across them, and the scope of your team.
Cool. So I'm the VP of Customer Success for SaaSOptics. SaaSOptics is a SaaS platform built for B2B SaaS companies. So most of our customers come to us in order to help them solve revenue recognition and SaaS metrics needs. So we're a financial operations platform. Most of our users are in the finance side of things, RevOps, sometimes customer success, but they're usually coming to us operating on smaller general ledgers like a QuickBooks Online or a Xero, but need to be able to manage their subscription business from longer term length, revenue recognition, billing, etc. When I got to SaaSOptics about 2.5 years ago, we were onboarding our customers and then reactively supporting them. But I helped start our proactive CSM organization. So much like Pat, we're responsible for everything post sale, setting them up, making them happy, and then renewing and upselling as well.
Brilliant, and congratulations as well on the recent funding and merger as well. It's we were just talking about it at the start of this conversation. Actually, it's sounds like a very exciting time for you.
Thanks. Yeah, we're now part of the Battery Ventures portfolio of companies, and they made an investment in SaaSOptics and our new sister company, Chargify, to help advance the financial operations workflow.
Yeah, it's awesome. As Vice President of Customer Success at Chili Piper, I can tell you that I wouldn't be able to do my work without our SaaSOptics account. So I have a lot of love for your product and the team as well that supports us. It's awesome. So we're here today to talk about the need to drive operational efficiencies. It's my belief that this is incredibly important in CS when you have scale in the team or when you're trying to scale the team. So I'd love to hear from each of you on the kind of inefficiencies that existed as you were scaling, and then what you did to overcome those inefficiencies. So Pat, why don't we start with you?
Yeah. Well, look, naturally, inefficiencies, or however you want to term it, occurs in every organization, and it gets worse as it scales. From my experience, without the process, which a lot of people can be a little bit scary, sort of speaking about or getting involved too much in, because it restricts your ability to do your job in some cases as a CSM, or perceived restriction of your ability to do your job.
Yeah.
Duplication kicks in, and I think that's the thing that bothers me the most in terms of inefficiency. It's duplication of effort. It's the sort of multiple reach outs to customers, multiple sort of methods of showing up to a customer, depending on who the CSM is. Hugely different variety of kind of slideware for the same event. All of these things, just get multiples worse as you scale, unless you deal with them straight off the bat. From our perspective, we've certainly over the last 18 months focused enormously on really trying to build the basics, I would put it. I'm a great believer in doing a couple of things like really, really well, rather than trying to do hundreds of things that in theory look good, but in reality just don't kind of hit the button. One of the most impactful things certainly I've done over the last 18 months is we had a lady in our team, Jess Harris, who, you know, was really a superstar at her job, at her current role 18 months ago, and who obviously had a massive ability to be able to bring order to chaos, and put her in a role that was very, very focused around what we term best practice in programs. You know, and really the remit we gave Jess was, you know, I needed to tackle every element of inefficiencies that we saw, and I needed to have somebody on the hook for the consistency of delivery ultimately, right from, you know, as I say, the customer journey through to the milestones, through to how we measure each of those milestones, and just making sure that ultimately the customer experience is optimal in that regard. So, you know, Jess has done a phenomenal job for us over the last 18 months, and I know, you know, has been very engaged with Chili Piper particularly, and went through a very exhaustive exercise.
We absolutely love working with Jess.
Yeah, I think everybody does. Yeah, everybody does. Yeah, and it deservedly so, because she's made an enormous difference. And I think, you know, my lesson certainly over the last 2 years, and previous to that, has been, it's very easy to get reactive and solve different problems at different times when it comes to, you know, the efficiencies of a CS org, because it's almost like he or she who shouts the loudest in sales gets what they want. The same applies when it comes to, you know, processes and being efficient in our business. Sometimes there's fires in certain parts of the business, and, you know, that's where your focus is directed. What I've always tried to do is to pull that back and just look at it from sort of I guess a higher level, which is where our customer journey kicked in. And you know, one of the areas that we spent a lot of time on is the concept of what we call our value pathways, which is really just, you know, a fancy name for, you know, clarity in terms of customer journey, but not just at a very, very high level. It's actually kind of digging very deep into it, and most importantly then aligning around what the tech stack looks like for that. I don't look at my technology in isolation. I look at it as a stack, and that stack has to work very well together. I'm a huge believer in best of breed. And, you know, we got to the point where we realized that, you know, the front of that funnel was a very inefficient process. And by the front, I mean the onboarding of customers, the kind of movement from our customers through stage to stage, and more specifically in terms of internal transition and kickoffs. Because for me, that's the kind of the first impression. You get that wrong, you're catching up for the rest of the relationship. Get it right, you're golden. Yeah. And that's really where Chili Piper kind of came in. You know, Jess identified that very, very quickly as an area that we just weren't engaging with as optimally as we should be. And yeah, this was one of those areas. And we found that, you know, corralling multiple internal stakeholders to meet within a time frame that created a great customer experience externally was actually very difficult, and super inefficient. And ultimately, you know, the output of that was that we just weren't engaging with our customers in a manner that most importantly mirrored the sales cycle, because, you know, the sales cycle has momentum. It's got, you know, the constant high levels of touch, mid-market and enterprise, obviously. And then it kind of, you know, crossed the line, and we just weren't getting ourselves together to be able to continue with that momentum, where we had a gap of like, you know, 25, 30 days before you had a kickoff, all of that kind of thing. So yeah, that was the main kind of area that we took a look at, and really has incorporated the onboarding team and the CSM team. And like I say, that's where Chili Piper came in, and, you know, that's where we've really kind of built a relationship from there. Yeah, awesome. And you know, I think measuring time to value is something that is critical for every CS leader out there, but I don't think every CS leader does it. I'm curious, did you measure it before you brought in? You identified that as a, you know, problem area, or area of duplication? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was you know, it's one of those things that sort of drives you mad when in theory it should be very obvious. You know, you kind of, you have very discrete, you know, collateral and processes for particular milestones, and it's like, just could everybody please do it the same way? But it just doesn't happen like that. And you know, from a time to value perspective, which is a metric we look at amongst many others now from the onboarding perspective, you know, we were we were looking at somewhere in the region of 29 to 30 days to schedule an initial kickoff call with our customer for a variety of reasons. But the main reasons that we saw was that it just wasn't happening. The process was breaking down and wasn't in any way automated. And it was very human driven, if that makes sense. It was up to the individual to sort of reach out and schedule and corral and to coalesce everybody to be on a call at the same time. And Chili Piper plugs straight away into that. And, in practically, I'll say it's overnight. I mean, just wouldn't be happy with me saying it happened overnight, given the amount of effort you put into making it, optimal. But it was pretty bloody quick. We took it from 29, I think it was down to 6 or 7 days, in terms of being able to have that initial kickoff call schedule. And I mean, again, from a customer experience perspective, that's exceptional. That's like we're on it. Like literally you've signed and we're then on it. And it's just such an in theory easy thing, but has a massive external customer impact. So forget about time to value from my perspective right now. It's a great metric and it's something that we track and it's had a massive impact. But think about the UX or the CX alone on that is hugely impactful from a customer point of view. It's in your inbox within 7 days, meeting schedule for the kickoff. Wow, you're off to the races straight away. And then we have the beauty of being able to sort of internally align ourselves without having to go back and forward. Are you free here? What dates work for you? It's like tick, tick, tick. Everyone's on, bang, email goes. Customer chooses. We know everyone's available. And I think, the other aspect to it is as well as time to value is our CSMs and our onboarding team really, really saw the impact almost instantly in terms of the efficiencies of their day, which is something that I personally obsess about as well, because I think too much technology in our game is geared towards some form of measurement or tracking, or particularly geared towards leadership and not always geared towards the CSM and the frontline crew who actually do the job on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, that was and I'm not, drinking the Kool-Aid here. Like that's a genuine sort of immediate impact that Chili Piper's had from a time to value perspective, but it was the ancillary sort of secondary impact that kind of really surprised us. And then, we're not even talking about the fact that we can get a customer live, 22 days faster than we did in the past. And the impact that has on, to what Chad mentioned in terms of revenue recognition and being able to turn the trigger on that a month earlier than we used to be able to. It's just, it had a huge impact and continues to have a huge impact.
Yeah, I think that's something that, really attracted me to Chili Piper. As you know, I'm fairly new here, and it was like finally a tool that customer success managers love. It's one that really makes a big difference in their day to day. And
I don't see it. I don't necessarily see it genuinely as a kind of an explicit tool for us. I think we've talked before, and I see it as an integral part to a kind of an efficiency engine, and that engine is the entire tech stack, and the tech stack as a whole has to be super efficient, and there'll be areas of it that are more or less, but Chili Piper is a path on that efficiency journey from deal signed to deal renewal that has had a massive sort of immediate impact, and quite frankly has set a pretty high bar for the other parts of that engine in terms of the kind of impact that we need to be able to have. So I think that to me, for anybody listening, I would encourage them to sort of think about it in that context rather than, discreetly or specifically solving a particular problem. It actually has significant knock-on impact effects, positive impact effects beyond, both sides of the actual milestone that we use it for.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Pat. So Chad, I know that you've, like Pat, have kind of gone through this high growth and need to scale the team. But from previous conversations, your use case of Chili Piper is a little bit different. So it would be awesome to hear about the kind of inefficiencies that existed and how you solved them in your team with Chili Piper, or
Sure. Yeah. So and Pat, for you, like the experience going from no booking tool to having a booking tool is is a big change and lots of values there. For us, when I came on board, the customer success team already had a booking tool, but it was more of a basic booking tool. So we were already using standardized booking links when we had assigned an implementation consultant to a new customer to kind of get the kickoff done, and having that process kind of automated. As soon as you assign them, email gets kicked out with appropriate booking link, get it done. If no booking within X number of days, remind the customer automatically, that kind of thing. So we were operating pretty well with that basic booking tool for our onboarding team. The key and efficiency that came in when we realized, hey, we need something better, is that the CSM team was the last team to be built within customer success. And looking back historically, because that team didn't exist, we just had less teams to coordinate between. And we also really weren't pushing our add-ons very much. But in 2020, we realized, hey, we've got a lot more here to offer. We have a larger customer base that we haven't talked to in a while. And we would reactively handle outreaches to the support team to say, hey, I'm interested in connecting to Salesforce. And so they, given the price for our Salesforce connector. But it was very, very reactive once we realized, hey, we actually want to put an add-on library inside our product so customers know which advanced modules and connectors they have, which they don't, if they're interested in them, how they actually get help. And also because our CSM team was newer, we didn't have enough CSMs to provide full coverage across the board. So some of our customers had an assigned CSM, some of them didn't. And if someone reached out that wanted to talk about an add-on, they don't have a CSM, who do you assign it to? And when we only had 1 or 2 CSMs, no big deal. Our manager could say, okay, you take this one. Okay, you take this one. Next thing you know, we have 3 CSMs, 4 CSMs. And that process of who is going to take this call, they came into support. Okay, let's pick this person, was all very manual. It was being done in the manager of the CSM's head. And we realized we had this round robin need. But we had something to go off because Chili Piper was already being used by our sales team. And we knew that they were already using the routing and the queuing mechanism. So that was one of the biggest things we knew that we needed, is that we had a process when a customer raised their hand to support. We had a 5-step process to kind of figure out who should take this one. Is it assigned? Is it unassigned? If unassigned, check with manager. They identify person, tell support. Support then responds with appropriate booking link to the customer so they can go then book the time with the CSM. And so that was like the big thing for us. So by implementing Chili Piper, we're able to just say, hey, the call to action when someone raises their hands is book time with customer success. And it immediately goes to the right person. So we've taken a 5-step process and it's now a 1-step process. And instead of those 5 touch points possibly taking up to 8 business hours to go from person to person to person back to customer, then book, it's done immediately in less than a half an hour of business time duration. So we've dramatically simplified the customer experience for, I'm interested in something, well, let's get you hooked up with this person right away to discuss it. And we've taken a lot of time savings off both our support team members and our manager not having to do these manual steps.
Yeah, I think I love this use case because you can't have good customer success teams without good customer support teams. And customer support teams, I think they often get left in the shadows. And that needs to change because they're the ones who are helping customers during their greatest time of need. It's like, if I have to go through to a technical support team, I'm already frustrated. I didn't want to have to ask for help necessarily or raise a concern. And then on the other hand, if you're a support person, you don't want to be getting questions that you shouldn't be dealing with, right? If they're commercial questions about add-ons and things like that, that's just taking time away from being able to really help customers who are in need. Yeah.
The other inefficiency I think we saw too was from a manager's perspective. It's like once you start using a booking tool and you find a scenario where you're having to do the manual, what time works for you, and here's some sample times for me, it feels like all of a sudden you're in quicksand and you're back in the Stone Ages. And it's like, why am I having to suddenly have this conversation on manually picking a time. So when it came to just special meetings, or maybe there's a customer escalation and something goes to the onboarding team manager or myself, and I need to book a time with a customer and 1 or 2 people on my team, our basic booking tool that we were using couldn't support that use case, right? So
to suggest the time.
Correct. So by having Chili Piper Instant Booker, and we're just able to say, okay, it's these 3 people, I can see the layered view, and I can very easily pick the times that work for my 2 to 3 internal resources and present those options to the customer. As a CS leader, that greatly simplified those customer meetings that I needed to be on without me having to go into my own tactical time on manually finding out a time that works.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, I try and speak to customers as often as possible. And there are times where CSMs will escalate me in, as you're saying. And I think if a customer needs to speak to you, if it's got to a point of escalation, then you don't want to be wasting time trying to find time to speak to them. Yep. Right? There's already frustration there that will get worse as time goes on. So I remember I used to say, I can leave anything in my diary to speak to you, but then it's still extra work for the person on the other end to suggest the time. Whereas now it's like, here's some times and here's my calendar. And by the way, I can also move anything in my diary.
Yeah.
And by the way, I still say diary, and I get a lot of
ridiculed.
A lot of jib for that from the rest of the team.
Yeah.
They're like, what are you talking about? It's a calendar, right?
It's a diary. It's a diary.
Yeah. Dear diary.
Yeah, exactly.
So the one other thing I'd mention too, the other key inefficiency that we have is, anybody that's operating customer success, you're in charge of an onboarding team. Mm-hmm. Time to value does matter. Like the length of the implementation or the duration of the implementation, it matters. It's no surprise that usually the shorter the implementation, the more successful it is, the happier the customer is, they get their value quicker. And even though we have a pretty well-oiled process in terms of what are the key milestones of the implementation, what are the tasks, when are the meetings going to happen, and you can lay all that out on your kickoff. And we have another CS tool that optimizes our onboarding process that the customers have access to. But eventually life happens, right? And the customer will say, well, I'm at my second or my third meeting, and I just need a little bit more time to do my homework, or I'm not available. Hey, can we reschedule, right? So they start rescheduling those milestone meetings and using the basic booking tool. It could work. You can say, oh, we'll just pick a new time that you can re-meet with us. But it was inevitable that our implementation consultants would kind of have to hunt the customer down. Like, you haven't rescheduled the meeting yet, please rebook. You haven't scheduled the meeting yet, please rebook. And by using the Chili Piper Instant Booker, where we're actually suggesting specific times, we've seen a pretty impressive uptake in those customers rebooking very quickly because they have something specific to react to, like in their email. Yeah. So just that mentality itself has helped us kind of shorten some of those rescheduling durations.
Yeah, we had a similar, experience from the enterprise customers. We've had a couple, overtly mention that they love the ease of booking through Chili Piper because of the way it just takes all of that headache away from those kind of sessions. Because in many cases, particularly with enterprise, we're scheduling a lot. Like it's not just a one-off kind of kickoff call. You're scheduling a success plan call. You're scheduling potentially multiple stakeholders internally, from IT to finance to the original stakeholder. So it is a pain. And in most cases, the people that we deal with, there isn't any support there in order to be able to do that. So it's a massive drain when you get into the enterprise world, because it's these are big implementations. And we had recently, one of our enterprise customers, as I say, explicitly called out like the impact of being able to do that so simply, and taking that away from them actually has. So, I mean, that's, again, it's quite nice to be able to hear that when, in reality, it's you guys have done and Jess obviously have done all the work here. But once it's embedded in that journey, and once I think it's viewed as part of a journey, it can have an even bigger impact. So it's not about solving a very specific problem right here, right now. It is about the overall experience and how joined up we look when we've got a platform like yours to be able to support in that kind of customer experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, something that's another similarity between the two of you that I think we've talked about this before, Pat, is both your sales teams are using Chili Piper.
Yeah.
Right. So that they were the original users of product. And, we're really well known for that use case of improving speed to lead. So if someone comes to your website, wants to book a demo with you, they shouldn't have to wait to be contacted for a meeting. They should be able to book a meeting. It should go route to the right person instantly. And that use case has kind of been like gold dust for us. And there's a CS side, which is equally as important, but I just think people don't know about it. Do you agree?
Well, I think I agree. Yeah, fully with that. I think what's fascinating with me, from my perspective, rather, is how often, the world of CS leverages technology that has, a slightly different slant, but can be equally as effective. This being one of them. Like our processes and workflows they're not crazy different. Just different title, different names, different outcomes. But incredibly powerful when actually leveraged properly. And we have a couple of tools now in the sales world that I'm looking at. Enablement, for example, is another area where everybody focuses on speed to ramp of a sales rep. But CSM support people, they're equally, if not more important, because that's like the real life now. It's not about the future deal, it's about the customer right now. So yeah, I think any CS leader who's not taking a look at what the sales tech stack is and seeing how they can leverage that themselves is probably missing a trick. And it's also quite easy to sort of hop on a few licenses as well, which helps. Go under the shadows, under the covers of sales when it comes to it. But I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah, exactly.
The license fee. I just needed it for users.
But I think with Chili Piper particularly, it was Jess who kind of identified that, and very quickly it just went, well, hang on a second, this is exactly the same but just a different name and has an even bigger impact. So let's roll with that.
Yeah, Chad, could you talk to kind of like your journey from using Chili Piper in sales to CS?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we copied a lot of our workflows from our sales team. We saw how big of an impact it was when originally our new leads came into our website and filled out a form because they were interested in a demo, which went internally to get assigned to someone who was in charge of reaching back out and then trying to schedule a team and looking at that whole funnel, right, of that level of interest from filling out the form to actually getting that first meeting. And once we replaced that whole thing with directly booking through Chili Piper, it dramatically changed our percentage of getting those meetings, the time to get those meetings, what it did for our sales cycle. And yeah, at the end of the day, a CSM team is very similar to sales, depending on how you have it set up. I mean, some companies will take.
Not everybody's like as commercially focused necessarily.
Right. Some companies will have their CS team identify opportunities, but then pass it back to sales to actually execute. We find a lot of value in having CSM handle that entire conversation. But I mean, the larger that you grow, the more important your current customer base is to the revenue of your company. And it at a certain point will eclipse the new ARR that you're bringing in. And most SaaS businesses are doing just that, and they're always improving their product. They're launching new products. They're launching new offerings. And the more that you can get your existing customer base to adopt those new capabilities, increases their dependence upon you, increases their stickiness, increases your net revenue retention. So kind of making sure you have a well-oiled growth engine within your existing customer base and your CS teams is super important. So you'll find yourself not just managing your sales cycle of your new business opportunity types, but your growth opportunity types, right? And when someone's ready to add and they see a pain point that they know a new capability of your product can solve, you want to activate that instantly. Strike while the iron's hot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's an impact on the overall customer experience. I don't know if do you have customer experience teams that are separate to CS in SaaSOptics and GoCardless? Or does customer experience fall under either of your remit?
Yeah, I mean, we have a CX team in GoCardless that lives in the customer success group. So they focus very explicitly on advocacy, NPS, all the usual sort of CX topics. But yeah, it's a team of about, I think it's 3 people right now.
Okay.
They track that
kind of thing.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
We do not have a dedicated CX team, but it's shared responsibility across customer success and product management. So, product management owns Pindo, which sits under the hood for us and operates some in-app guides and things of that nature. But we collaborate on the overall customer experience.
Yeah. I'm asking because I've never worked at an organization that's kind of large enough to have its own CX team. It's always been what you've described, Chad, more of that shared responsibility. But, customer experience, it equals common sense, right? So if you've got one way of talking to customers and meeting with them in sales, and then a way in customer success that's totally different, that doesn't follow common sense.
Yeah. And I think from our perspective, I was fortunate that I inherited that team when I joined, because we were very much a sort of a large scale, long tail company. We were very self-serve. So CX was critical in terms of getting the pulse of the customer because we didn't have the luxury of, high touch engagements at that time.
Yeah.
But as we've kind of taken it on and as it's evolved, we're kind of going harder into that, quite frankly, because I would challenge what you said, Gemma, in terms of never worked at a place the size of which merited a CX individual or team. I think that's a challenge. That's a decision.
I'm ready for it.
I'm just saying that's a decision you make. I don't think the size. I don't think anymore the size. Let me rephrase it. I guess we all can make these kind of decisions in terms of where roles go, right? The way I kind of look at my headcount is I have a set number of individual roles and I can choose what those roles are. Just because I'm backfilling a CSM doesn't mean I have to backfill with a CSM, right? And right. I think from my perspective, when I think about, Jess being a good example of a role that wasn't there, 15 months ago, but, straight away, like she's had a bigger impact on my business than probably most other roles have had in the space that she's been doing it, because it was a problem, it was an issue, it was a challenge. And I'm not saying CX is an issue for everybody, but the concept of sort of, making sure that you've got somebody who lives and breathes these things, for me is worth giving somewhere else. And I think, for the Chili Piper experience and, her control over best practice and programs, it feels like a luxury. You've got somebody who manages customer success best practice, but it's not a luxury. It's an absolute necessity because, effectively, she effectively controls the customer experience. I mean, that's the way I look at that role. And I think, as we as leaders sort of go down these paths, I think things like operations, areas like, to Chad's point about, even what SaaSOptics do, how much more valuable is it to have something that can give you that kind of forward view of your business comparable to putting an individual on it, or to have it as 1/8 of an individual's job is immeasurable. And I think, when it comes to this kind of area that we're talking about here, the time to value particularly, the older and the more kind of years I have in this game, the more I'm beginning to realize that sometimes it's more about just pinpointing the right area than it is, you know, having the same kind of processes. If you want to make these kind of, I call them kind of force multiplier improvements. And when I look at, you know, Chili Piper taking us from 29 days to 7 days, like that's a force multiplier, right? That's not just a tweak or a change. That's something that's effectively going to speed up our onboarding and thereby our time to value and thereby our rev rec by, you know, multiples as we go through that process. So yeah, that's something I'm quite kind of passionate about, because I think we always feel in CS to some degree, I think it's fair that we kind of have to justify to a certain degree elements of our business when, you know, I think we need to be much more aggressive in terms of sort of where we place our bets sometimes.
Right. So the comparison there being, you know, if you're in sales, you don't need to justify having someone in sales ops. If you're bringing in Salesforce, you don't need to justify getting a Salesforce admin, you know. But if you're in CS, there is maybe a sense that you do need to justify that, because CS is just newer as an industry, right? So we don't have people with 20 years experience in operations.
But I'd also say we don't need people with 20 years experience in operations. We need people who know what they're doing, and we need to give them a chance. You know what I mean? Right. Like, I mean, again, I think the great thing about our industry is that, you know, it is new, and because it's new, we can do stuff like we're talking about today. You know, we can take chances. We can tweak this. We can tweak that. Now, yes, obviously, it's in its infancy to some degree in terms of, I guarantee you, in 5 to 10 years' time, no one will ever question the need for an operations team in customer success or a customer experience team in customer success. And people like, you know, you, me, and Chad will be looking back thinking, oh my God, like, imagine if you had what you had now, then life would have been so different. But but I think that's the exciting thing for me. And I think that's why I just love, you know, conversations like this and platforms like Chili Piper, and again, you know, SaaSOptics and GoCardless. Like, we're to some degree, you know, we're kind of able to, you know, drive that change through, you know, driving the impact that, you know, Chili Piper's had for us, for example, because it's a great story to tell. It's a fantastic story to tell. You know, this happened, it had that outcome, and that outcome is awesome. So let's do more of it, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And Chad, I know I don't think you have CS ops dedicated at the moment, do you? So you basically, you brought in Chili Piper and everything else in your tool set all by yourself. And it'd be really helpful when I was going to RFP for, you know, our customer success tools. I borrowed your framework to begin with. Could you talk to, you know, some of the things that you've learned building a best of breed, as Pat says, stack without having
it's well, the more that we grow, the more I am seeing a need for CS ops. I mean, it's basically been myself and my department leads that have been kind of architecting the solution and figuring out how they wanted to operate for their team. For us, the CSM team was a more complex scenario, needing queues and routers to go from assigned or unassigned and those different scenarios. So we needed sort of the souped up version or the hot Chili Piper version for that team, versus my onboarding and support teams were a little bit more of a straightforward model. So they have different workspaces that they were able to set up and manage. But kind of going through the implementation itself, it really did help us kind of reflect on what are the types of conversations that we need and what needs its own set of queues and routers and meeting types, right? It's not just an add-on discussion. Sometimes it's a renewal discussion. Sometimes it's an ad hoc call. And how do we want to drive best practices in terms the normal length of those meetings or the standard talk track? Because you could be someone coming from the support to the CSM team, and you can use standard language in your meeting types and your reminders to help remind the customers what the meeting is and what it isn't. And so the same thing kind of comes from the onboarding side of things. And when you're scheduling the original meeting, who should you bring to the kickoff call? You know, is it just your primary implementation contact? What's the value of bringing your executive sponsor? So some of those things that, you know, were things we were trying to drive a little bit more consistency within our process and trying to train our team members on, hey, please use this talk track because it's going to help down the line if this one situation happens. We're able to drive that as more of a standard operation by figuring out the default language. And, you know, using the power of Chili Piper where we have those different messages to drive the outcomes we would like to. And so we've seen good adoption of that. One thing, for example, we've been trying to drive our support team members to take more calls. Now we operate on Zendesk and we're largely just a ticketing company. You can submit a ticket, you can submit an email. But sometimes when you get a certain type of support request, that agent could go off and test the scenario and try to come up with the right solution and send a perfectly orchestrated response with the right screenshots and annotations to solve the problem. Or can you sniff out a little bit early, maybe I could go down this path, which might end up in 3 to 4 asynchronous responses that might take 2 business days to complete? Or can I say, you know what, I think we might be able to solve this in a 15-minute call. Can you use my 15-minute booking link and we'll schedule a quick call? Maybe we can just knock this thing out right now. So number one, training the support team to do that mindset is key. But we also, as we were starting to do that, we'd see the scenario of the customer gets on the call, you knock out their problem and it'd say, oh, while I've got you, can I just talk to you about these 5 other things on the top of my head, right? And now they're kind of turning that one support incident to multiple things. So we try to drive standard language into we're only gonna do a 15-minute call and we have to keep it to the scope of the original incident because we need to be able to turn around and go give top tier support to the next person as well. So sometimes those behavioral aspects that you see come out you can try to reinforce it or try to avoid those things and how you position things up front.
Right. And, you know, credit to you for driving that top-down initiative as well, because it is hard. I mean, one of the things that I had to really get into in this new role at Chili Piper was really learning the tech in much more detail than I ever had before. But I'm so glad that I did, because now I understand how I can route customers instantly to the most, you know, appropriate CSM. And I spent hours doing that kind of work in my last place. Fair enough, it was a high touch enterprise model, so it wasn't more than, you know, a couple of customers a week that I was assigning, but still a lot went into it. And with Chili Piper, you know, we've got the ability to automatically do routing in so many different ways that really does save time for me as well as time for the team. So before we open up for questions, is there any other ROI that you'd like to share from Chili Piper specifically?
Yeah, I think, sorry, Chad, you go on. You want to say something?
Well, yeah, I'll just throw out one thing. I mean, I did, in terms of kind of quantifying the time savings that we saw. So I kind of talked through that process to kind of go from support to CSM. We took a 5-step process down to a 1-step process. And we looked at the level of effort that it would have taken us internally between support agents, the manager, the CSM team, to find the right team member. And like each time that happened, we saved probably a total of 35 minutes per engagement. And having Chili Piper reporting, we know that over the first half of this year, we've had 100 engagements of just that. I'm interested in an add-on scenario. So over that first half of the year, we've saved 58 hours of internal time in half a year, largely of our team manager's time, where he was spending time doing just busy work, right? And instead, he's using that time to coach the CSMs, to give them better talk tracks, to help them handle objection handling, be better at their craft instead of doing a clerical menial task.
Right. I mean, we're customer success. We should be out there with customers or enabling people to do more of that. and we're spending all this time inward still. So I love that example. Thank you for sharing. I'm curious.
Think, sorry, just from our perspective, one thing we haven't talked about today, in obviously, it's a priority in terms of externally, but internally, where we saw a ton of value was with regard to actually meetings being tracked in Salesforce. So our tech stack is Salesforce for our CRM. I use that, for our CSMs with obviously, different elements of different platforms depending on what we're looking for. But, we went through the roof now in terms of our ability to track those meetings when a meeting's booked. So everything now is automatically booked. And I mean, I think the percentage uplift was ridiculous. Like it was 150, 200%, something like that, in meetings being actually tracked in Salesforce. And again, from a control perspective, from an SLA perspective, from an ability to sort of see how seamless that journey is for our customers. I mean, that's hugely valuable. And to Chad's point, it's one less thing for a CSM to have to enter in a CRM tool, because we all know CSMs love entering stuff into CRMs. It's their favorite task. But back to my original point about value to a CSM, like that's true value to be able to give back 5-10 minutes or whatever it would take in a day to do that. So I mean, that was a big plus for us as well.
Absolutely. And Chad, coming back to what you said, you get that visibility in Salesforce as well, right? With all your meetings being booked. But given that you're saving time with the add-on, the expansion requests coming in from customers, is that having an impact on deal velocity as well? So are you actually upselling faster now?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we're able to identify things of interest a lot earlier in the cycle. I mean, we actually haven't been measuring the sales cycle of our add-on experience too long. It used to be we were just kind of creating an opportunity after the customer's like, yep, I want to buy it. And we create it and close it, right? But once we kind of orchestrated out our process to where we really know at like the 10% interest level phase all the way through closed one for add-on ops, we're seeing a lot less time because it goes straight to the team that's responsible.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And this is supposed to be fly on the wall. So, since I have you both in the same Zoom room, I will add to this that one of the things I want to go through with you both is how I'm using Chili Piper to build headcount for my customer success and support team, from that ability to track all my meeting hours in Salesforce and understand what type of meetings customers are requesting, both inbound through our product or through our personal pages, and also outbound, from the ones that we push out through our customer journey playbook. So that's something I want to go through with you both.
Yeah.
At another time.
That'd be great.
Have I caught your interest, Pat?
Yeah, completely. Always.
Awesome. Okay, so let's open up to questions. All right. So the first question, we've got quite a few from the audience. The first question is, what are the upsides and/or downsides to operationalizing all aspects of customer interactions, meetings included? Who wants to take that one? I guess another way to ask the question is, are there any downsides to operationalizing all aspects of the customer journey or customer interactions, meetings included?
Personally, I'm not sure what you mean. I mean, operationalizing is I don't think anybody is really talking about, taking the human element out of, customer interactions here. Certainly what I'm saying is there are elements to that are unnecessary to be driven by an individual. And I think that as long as the tone is right and as long as the timing is right, I think it's completely acceptable. In actual fact, it's a value add. I think where you clearly need to be conscious of is, once those meetings are scheduled and once that sort of effort has been made from a customer's perspective, that you deliver on that expectation. So I think I don't see any downside as long as it's thought through, and as long as it's not sort of ad hoc or just plug a gap plug, if that makes sense. That's probably one of the downsides if you don't think about it just more in the concept of the journey, and more so in the concept of a particular kind of event. Perhaps things can fall through the cracks, but
yeah,
we've certainly seen none. We've seen nothing but positive feedback from the process.
Yeah, I think it has to just not be onerous on the customer, right?
Yeah.
So you can't like build a process and then get into some kind of analysis paralysis and make it really convoluted, and then the customer gets confused and isn't sure what to do. And I'm not knocking booking links in their own, because there's a lot of booking links tools out there, and I think if you're not using anything, you should at least start with that. But I think the overuse of those where you're just like throwing them at people and saying like, book in time with me, but you're not setting an agenda, or you're not suggesting the time, and you're not guiding them through, you know, why they need to book in time with you. That's like an example of an efficiency for your team that is onerous for your customer.
Right. Yeah, that's it. It's a good point. And making sure that you don't, if people become so dependent upon automation, are there scenarios where they could just fire and forget to come back on it, right? So if it's, hey, we need to keep our implementation going, please rebook the meeting time, and you've sent that to them and you've passed the ball to the customer, you can't just forget that, right? You need to have your own eyeballs on it. Are you setting your own snooze reminder on that email to make sure you're coming back if they don't rebook? The other thing I would say is that, you know, the deeper you get into automating and operationalizing your processes, and Pat, like you, I'm a fan of kind of point solutions that are really good at what they do, which means you're plugging a bunch of things in together. And the more that you do that, you're weaving sometimes a wicked web that possibly could break if you don't keep your eyeballs on it, right? And especially if you are doing things like we're doing at SaaSOptics, where you're doing like a customer marketing launch event, or you're saying, hey, our highlighted module of the week is this, and you send it out in your newsletter to almost 1,000 customers, and that call to action is going to your Chili Piper form. You know, are you testing it? Are you making sure that it works? Because once you get out there, you're very much dependent upon it. So if something breaks, you feel it a lot more, right? Because you become dependent upon this automation. So like anything, just, you know, measure twice, cut once.
Yep, I love that. And something Pat taught me that's stuck with me is done is sometimes better than good, right? Like if you're not doing anything, just take baby steps. Just start doing something and then iterate upon it. Okay, so we'll take one more question. So what do you see as the next great innovation in customer success operations?
Customer success operations specifically. I'm not sure. From my perspective, it's not so much an innovation as an acceptance that it's an absolute, you know, it's a need to have. Like it's as simple as that. It's going to get to a point where, you know, if you don't have at least one person who's obsessing over operations, whatever and however you define operations, then you know, there's a problem. And I think I really think that we're maybe, you know, 2 to maybe 5 years away from that, because obviously there's a large justification that's going to be required from a headcount perspective, and you know, because it's not a quota bearing head, it'll obviously, you know, raise red flags all over the place. But I think it's on us as leaders now to take that leap, and to back ourselves. You know, if we feel like an operations individual is going to have an impact, then, you know, take a punt. 50-50. Right. You could do this, you could do that. Well, do that. Try doing that. And that's kind of where the rubber hits the road with operations, because it's one thing to say it would have a big impact. It's another thing to put your money where your mouth is and say, you know what, I'm going to forego a CSM headcount for the next 6 months because I know this role is going to make a difference. And I think that's the only way to do it. And you know, honestly, it's been the most impactful sort of, you know, thing I've ever done in the last 5 to 6 years. Is just make sure that role, whatever the individual's experience was, as long as they know your business, they directionally know what you're looking to do, they'll get it done, you know, and like I say, baby steps, you know, just evolve over time. That to me is the one I'd love to see much more of.
So the biggest innovation is acceptance.
I think it's it's acceptance in time, but it's people now taking that leap of faith, because it is a leap of faith, right? You've got one headcount, if you've got one open rec, it's hard to move it away from something that you're comfortable in. You put a CSM on a portfolio of 10 customers, you know those 10 customers are going to be looked after. Okay, fine. But if you take a punt in the opposite direction, you are, risking to some degree something, but you're hoping that the payoff is going to be greater. And I've certainly experienced that to be the case in the last 2 roles that I've done. 100%. It's made me a better CCO, and it's made my business better. So I think that to me is innovation, but it's all, like I say, it's leaders taking a leap.
So for me, it's the lifeblood of a SaaS company is the recurring revenue, right? It's what drives the enterprise value, and for that you need retention. And there's lots of different systems out there to kind of measure your customers and measure the health and whatnot. But most companies have a limited number of resources. So how do you deploy them, and how do you deploy them in scenarios where you can affect change, and you can affect change early enough before like a switching decision is made. So a lot of the data that's being fed in, if it's not hand-to-hand combat, is data fed on kind of what's happening or already happened, which is a trailing indicator. But ideally, you need to get ahead of the leading indicators, the things that could be a problem in the future, where you think you can affect change. So whether or not you're losing your champion, but you don't know about it, and how do you find out about that staff turnover over that new person that's making a decision that you haven't talked to? That's kind of for us the things that we're trying to get future insight into is the change that's coming, not the one that's already happened.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really big on those. Well, we are at time. Thank you both so much for joining today. For everyone who's listening, you will receive a copy of this recording to your email. We'll also be hosting a version on our website under our resources page. For any questions that we didn't get to, apologies. We will do our best to respond to them afterwards, and you can reach out to me anytime on LinkedIn, Gemma at Chili Piper, and these two both are very, very helpful people that I recommend you connect with if you haven't already. Thank you, Chad.
Awesome. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a great day.
Thank you.
See you later.
Bye.